Mark is preparing for the perfect Christmas in Los Angeles, roasting a turkey and dreaming of family warmth. But when his father-in-law introduces a new, perfect guy for his wife Sarah at the holiday dinner, Mark realizes that his marriage is a chess game where he is not the victim, but the grandmaster. Secrets, lies, and a stunning twist await at the holiday table. Is Mark ready to play his last card? Mark Rodriguez woke at 5 a.m. in his Santa Monica home, the sky still dark outside. Christmas morning, 2025, and he was already in the kitchen, wrestling a 20-pound turkey onto the counter. His hands moved with precision, seasoning the bird with rosemary and thyme, a ritual rooted in his grandmother's recipe. This house, inherited from her, was his pride, a sanctuary he'd built for a family that never quite felt like his own. Today, he aimed to make the holiday perfect, despite the growing distance between him and his wife, Sarah. By 6:30, the kitchen hummed with activity. Mark chopped onions for stuffing, the sharp scent mixing with sage. He mashed potatoes from scratch, refusing canned shortcuts. Every task grounded him, a way to anchor himself in a marriage that felt like it was slipping through his fingers. Sarah, 36, still slept upstairs, likely glued to her phone, even in her dreams. Her indifference stung, but Mark pushed it aside, focusing on the meal. He wanted this Christmas to remind them of better times. At 8 a.m., the doorbell chimed. Delivery for the dessert he'd ordered, a pecan pie from a local bakery, Sarah's favorite. He signed for it, exchanging a quick smile with the driver, who wished him a Merry Christmas. Mark set the pie on the counter, next to the cranberry sauce he'd simmered the night before. The house smelled like warmth and tradition, but a quiet unease gnawed at him. Sarah hadn't helped with a single dish in years, leaving Mark to carry the weight of their holidays alone. By 10, he was setting the table, arranging plates with care. His phone buzzed, a text from his lawyer, Andrew, confirming their meeting next week. Mark ignored it, not ready to think about the papers he'd been preparing. Instead, he checked the oven, where the turkey roasted, its golden skin promising a feast. He wasn't just cooking for Sarah, but for her family, who'd arrive soon. Juan, her overbearing father, Lorena, her status-obsessed mother, and Olivia, her sister, whose sharp tongue could cut glass. Mark braced himself for their usual condescension. Sarah appeared at 11, stumbling into the kitchen with bedhead and her phone in hand. "Morning," she mumbled, eyes fixed on the screen. No thanks for the hours Mark had spent, no acknowledgement of the effort. Her fingers tapped out a message, lips twitching in a half-smile that wasn't for him. "Big day today," she said, voice flat, as if the holiday were just another Tuesday. Mark's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone light. "Yeah, turkey's almost ready. Your folks will be here soon." She nodded, barely listening, and wandered to the living room, still texting. Mark watched her go, a familiar ache settling in his chest. When had she stopped caring? When had their marriage become a one-man show? He shook it off, stirring the green bean casserole. No time for self-pity. He had a dinner to pull off, and he'd be damned if it wasn't flawless. At 3 p.m., Juan and Lorena swept through the front door, their presence filling the house like an uninvited storm. Juan, a mid-level corporate manager, carried himself like he ran Wall Street, his handshake firm but dismissive. Lorena, dripping with jewelry, scanned the room with a critical eye, as if Mark's home were a fixer-upper she wouldn't touch. "Smells busy," she said, her tone implying he'd overreached. Mark forced a smile, offering them wine. "Made it all from scratch," he said, gesturing to the spread. Juan grunted, unimpressed, and settled into the dining room. Olivia arrived next, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Wow, Mark, you're really playing chef today," she said, her voice laced with mockery. She tossed her coat on a chair and joined her parents, already launching into a story about her latest influencer deal. Mark tuned her out, checking the turkey's temperature. Perfect at 165 degrees. He pulled it from the oven, the centerpiece of a meal he'd poured his heart into. But the warmth of the moment faded as he caught Sarah's glance. Not at him, but at her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. The doorbell rang at 4:30, sharp and unexpected. Sarah leapt up, her face lighting up in a way Mark hadn't seen in months. She hurried to the door, her steps too eager for a casual guest. Mark's gut twisted. He set the carving knife down, wiping his hands on a towel, and watched as Sarah returned with a man he didn't know. Tall, polished, with a smile that screamed money, the stranger carried a cheap bottle of grocery store wine. "Everyone, this is Dave," Sarah said, her voice too bright. "He's a friend." Juan stood, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Dave, glad you could make it." He clapped the man on the shoulder, guiding him to the table. Mark, meet Dave Morales. He's a partner at Whitman and Associates, one of the top firms in L.A. The words hit like a punch. Mark's eyes flicked to Sarah, who avoided his gaze, then to Lorena, who beamed at Dave like he was a long-lost son. Olivia smirked, sipping her wine, clearly in on whatever this was. Mark picked up his butter knife, spreading it across a roll with deliberate calm. "Nice to meet you, Dave," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. He took a bite, chewing slowly, letting the silence stretch. Juan's next words dropped like a grenade. "Dave's the kind of guy who'd be perfect for Sarah, you know, down the road." The room froze. Sarah choked on her wine, her eyes wide. Lorena nodded eagerly, oblivious to the tension. Olivia's smirk widened, like she was watching her favorite drama unfold. Mark swallowed his bite, setting the roll down. "Perfect for Sarah, huh?" he said, his tone conversational but sharp. "Funny thing, Juan. This house we're sitting in, it's in my name. Inherited it before Sarah and I met. And that prenup she signed?" He paused, locking eyes with his father-in-law. Ironclad. Sarah's glass trembled in her hand. Dave shifted uncomfortably, his polished smile fading. The air crackled with unspoken truths, and Mark knew this dinner was about to become something else entirely. Mark leaned back in his chair, the dining room thick with tension. His words about the house and prenup lingered, a spark waiting to ignite. Sarah's hand froze midair, her wine glass quivering like her composure. Dave, the uninvited guest, stared at his plate, clearly regretting his decision to show up. Juan, Sarah's father, tried to regain control, clearing his throat. "Let's not get carried away, Mark," he said, his voice tight. "This is a family dinner, not a courtroom." Mark carved a slice of turkey, his knife gliding through with precision. "Family, right," he replied, his tone calm but laced with steel. "Funny how family brings a stranger to my table to replace me." He set the knife down, fixing Juan with a steady gaze. "Care to explain why Dave's the perfect guy for Sarah's future?" Sarah's eyes darted to her father, pleading for rescue, but Juan fumbled, his usual swagger crumbling. Lorena, Sarah's mother, jumped in, her voice sharp with indignation. "You're twisting this, Mark. Dave's just a friend, here to enjoy the holiday." She gestured at Dave, who nodded weakly, clutching his cheap wine bottle like a lifeline. Mark raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "A friend who gets a glowing intro as Sarah's post-divorce upgrade? That's some friendship." He took a sip of wine, letting the accusation settle. Olivia, Sarah's sister, couldn't resist stirring the pot. "You're being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "Nobody's replacing anyone. You're acting like Sarah's done something wrong." Mark's lips twitched into a half-smile. "Haven't you, Sarah?" he asked, turning to his wife. Her face paled, and she set her glass down hard, liquid sloshing. "Mark, stop," she whispered, voice cracking. "You're embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" Mark leaned forward, his voice low but deliberate. "I spent all day cooking for your family while you planned my exit. That's not embarrassment, Sarah. That's betrayal." The room went silent, forks clinking against plates the only sound. Dave shifted, his chair creaking as he edged toward escape. Mark caught his movement. "Stay, Dave. You're part of this now. Juan invited you for a reason." Juan bristled, his face reddening. "Don't lecture me in your house, Mark. We're just looking out for Sarah's happiness." Mark nodded, as if considering the point. "Happiness, sure. Like the happiness Sarah's been chasing every Tuesday afternoon at the Ritz-Carlton?" Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lorena's jaw dropped, and Olivia's smirk vanished. Dave looked like he'd been slapped, his eyes darting to Sarah for answers. "What are you talking about?" Juan demanded, his voice rising. Mark pulled out his phone, scrolling casually. "Interesting charges on your corporate card, Juan. Every Tuesday, same hotel, same suite. Paid for by your company." He tapped the screen, pulling up a screenshot of a bank statement. "Care to guess who's been signing for those rooms?" Sarah's breathing quickened, her eyes wide with panic. "Mark, don't," she pleaded, but he ignored her. "I didn't snoop," Mark continued, his tone even. "Sarah left her laptop open last week, banking app logged in. Showed a new account at First National, one she never mentioned. Small transfers, nothing flashy, but enough to build a little nest egg." He looked at Sarah, who was shaking her head, tears welling. "Planning something, honey? Maybe a fresh start?" Dave's face hardened, realization dawning. He pushed his chair back, standing. "I didn't sign up for this," he muttered. "Sit down, Dave," Mark said not unkindly. "You're not the villain here. You just walked into a script you didn't write." Dave hesitated, then sank back into his seat, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Lorena tried to pivot, her voice shrill. This is outrageous. You're spying on your own wife? Mark shook his head. Not spying. Listening. Sarah took calls in my kitchen, whispering about plans while I made breakfast. Hard to miss when it's in your own home. Olivia, desperate to deflect, pointed at Mark. You're making this a witch hunt. Sarah's allowed to have friends. Mark chuckled, the sound cold. Friends don't get introduced as future husbands at Christmas dinner. Friends don't charge hotel rooms to daddy's corporate card. He turned to Juan, whose bluster had faded. Your firm's compliance team might find those charges interesting, Juan. I gave them a heads up last week. They're already digging. Juan's eyes widened, his fork dropping with a clatter. You call my office, he croaked, the weight of the words sinking in. Mark nodded, slicing another piece of turkey. Had to. Fraud's a serious thing. Misusing company funds? That's the kind of stuff that ends careers. Sarah's tears spilled over, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus, why are you doing this? He met her gaze, unflinching. Because you did this first, Sarah. You and your family thought I was too dumb to notice. The dining room felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode. Lorena clutched her napkin, knuckles white. This is about family, Mark. You're tearing us apart. Mark tilted his head, unimpressed. Family? You brought a stranger to my table to audition for my life. That's not family, that's a setup. Dave cleared his throat, voice shaky. I didn't know, okay? They told me you two were done. Mark's eyes softened slightly, but his tone stayed firm. They lied, Dave. And now you're caught in their mess. Sarah stood, her chair scraping the floor. We need to talk, Mark. Alone. Her voice trembled, but there was a hint of defiance. Mark shook his head, setting his fork down. No, Sarah. We're past private chats. You wanted this public, inviting him here. Now we deal with it in the open. He leaned back, folding his arms. Tell me, when did you decide I wasn't enough? When did you start planning this with your parents and Olivia? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Juan's face was a mask of shock, Lorena's indignation faltered, and Olivia looked away, suddenly silent. Dave's discomfort was palpable, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Mark's phone buzzed, a text from his lawyer, Andrew, confirming the paperwork was ready. He ignored it, focusing on the moment. This wasn't just a dinner gone wrong. It was the unraveling of a marriage, a family, and a carefully laid plan that had underestimated him from the start. The dining room in Mark Rodriguez's Santa Monica home pulsed with raw tension, the Christmas dinner now a battlefield. Mark sat at the head of the table, his gaze steady, holding the room captive after exposing Sarah's secret bank account and the Ritz-Carlton charges on Juan's corporate card. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her hands clenched into fists. Dave, the unwitting guest, gripped the edge of his chair, his escape plan thwarted by Mark's command to stay. Juan's authoritative facade had crumbled, his silence louder than any protest. Lorena, Sarah's mother, broke the quiet, her voice shrill with desperation. You're blowing this out of proportion, Mark. Those hotel charges could be anything, business meetings, client lunches. She waved a hand, as if dismissing evidence could erase it. Mark tilted his head, his smile sharp. Business meetings in the presidential suite, Lorena? Every Tuesday, same time, same room? He slid his phone across the table, open to a screenshot of the transactions. Signed by Sarah. Not exactly a PowerPoint presentation. Sarah's breath hitched, and she lunged for the phone, but Mark pulled it back smoothly. Don't bother, he said, voice calm but unyielding. I've got backups. Emails, screenshots, even voicemails. He tapped his temple, emphasizing his preparation. 15 years of marriage teaches you to notice when someone's building a life without you. Sarah sank back into her seat, her defiance wilting. Dave's eyes flicked to the door, his discomfort now a physical itch. Olivia, Sarah's sister, tried to pivot, her tone dripping with false concern. Mark, you're humiliating Sarah in front of everyone. Is this really the place? Mark's laugh was short, cutting. The place? You mean my house, where you all planned her future without me. He gestured to Dave, who flinched. You brought her perfect match to my table, Olivia. That's not family, it's a coup. Olivia's mouth snapped shut, her usual venom neutralized. One finally spoke, his voice hoarse. You went to my company, Mark? You reported me? His hands trembled as he gripped the table, the weight of his career teetering. Mark nodded, unfazed. I called compliance last Thursday. Gave them dates, amounts, everything. They're auditing your expenses as we speak. Juan's shoulders slumped, the reality sinking in. You could have talked to me first, he muttered. But the fight was gone from his words. Sarah's voice broke through, quivering with panic. Mark, I didn't mean for this to happen. It wasn't planned like that. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his expression unreadable. Not planned, he countered. You opened a secret account, Sarah. You met Dave at the Ritz on your dad's dime. You let your family parade him here like I'm already gone. He leaned forward, voice low. That's not an accident. That's a strategy. Dave stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. I'm out, he said, voice tight. I thought you were separated. Nobody told me this. He grabbed his coat, but Mark's voice stopped him cold. You're not the problem, Dave. They used you, but you might want to stick around for this next part. Dave hesitated, caught between curiosity and dread, then sat, his posture rigid. Mark pulled a small recorder from his pocket, setting it on the table with a deliberate thud. 6 months of conversations, he said, pressing play. Sarah's voice crackled through, hushed but clear, talking to Olivia in their kitchen. Dave's perfect, Liv. Once this is over, we'll start fresh. Olivia gasped, her face paling. The recording shifted to Juan, his voice smug. Mark won't see it coming. Dave's got the connections we need. The room froze, the truth laid bare in digital clarity. Lorena's hand flew to her chest, her voice a whisper. You recorded us? That's illegal. Mark shook his head, unfazed. Not in California. One-party consent, and I was always in the room. You just didn't notice me listening. He stopped the recording, pocketing the device. Amazing what you hear when people think you're too busy cooking to care. Sarah's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. Mark, please. I was confused, unhappy. I didn't know how to tell you. Unhappy. Mark's tone sharpened, but he kept his composure. You could have talked to me, Sarah. Instead, you planned my replacement while I was making your damn pecan pie. He pointed to the dessert, untouched on the counter. I gave you everything. House, security, love. And you gave me lies. Juan shifted, his face ashen, but said nothing. Olivia tried to interject, but Mark cut her off. Save it, Olivia. Your advice to Sarah's on tape too. Dave's voice broke the silence, low and strained. They told me you were done, Mark. Said Sarah needed someone stable. Mark's eyes softened slightly, but his resolve held. They lied to you, Dave. But you're not stupid. You knew something was off when you walked in. Dave nodded, his jaw tight. I should have asked more questions. He stood again, this time with purpose. I'm not part of this. He headed for the door, and Mark didn't stop him. As the front door clicked shut, Sarah sobbed, her words barely coherent. Mark, we can fix this. I'll stop everything, I swear. Mark stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. Fix what, Sarah? A marriage you checked out of? A family that thinks I'm disposable? He walked to the counter, grabbing his car keys. You made your choices. Now live with them. Lorena stood, her voice trembling with rage. You're destroying this family, Mark. Think about what you're doing. Mark turned, his eyes cold. You destroyed it, Lorena. You, Juan, Olivia, all of you. You thought you could rewrite my life without asking. He looked at Sarah, who was shaking, her mascara streaking. You wanted freedom, Sarah? You've got it. But it comes with a price. He opened the recorder app on his phone, forwarding the files to his lawyer with a tap. Andrew's got everything he needs. Divorce papers, fraud report, all of it. We're done. The room erupted, Lorena shouting about reputation, Olivia accusing Mark of cruelty, Sarah begging for a second chance. Juan remained silent, staring at the table like a man facing a firing squad. Mark stepped toward the hallway, his movements deliberate. The weight of 15 years lifted with each step, replaced by a clarity he hadn't felt in months. He wasn't just walking away from a dinner. He was walking away from a lie. Mark Rodriguez stood in the hallway of his Santa Monica home, car keys in hand, the echoes of the ruined Christmas dinner still ringing from the dining room. Sarah's sobs mixed with Lorena's shrill accusations, while Olivia's voice cut through, blaming Mark for the chaos. Juan, uncharacteristically silent, stared at the floor, his usual bravado gone. Mark's phone buzzed, another desperate text from Sarah, begging to talk. He swiped it away, his decision made. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Sarah stumbled into the hallway, her eyes red and pleading. Mark, wait, she said, her voice raw. We can work this out. I messed up, okay? I'll end it with Dave. I'll do anything. Mark paused, his hand on the doorknob, but his expression was stone. Work it out, he said, voice low and final. You invited a stranger to our home to replace me, Sarah. You used your dad's card for hotel rooms. You had money. That's not a mistake. That's a plan. Lorena charged in behind Sarah, her hands waving wildly. You're throwing away a marriage over nothing, she snapped. This is about pride, Mark, not love. Mark turned, his gaze piercing. Pride? You brought a man to my table to audition for my life. You call that nothing? He stepped closer, his voice steady but sharp. You all thought I'd just roll over. You underestimated me. Lorena froze, her words caught in her throat. Olivia appeared, clutching her wine glass, ready to escalate. You're acting like a victim, Mark, she said, her tone biting. Sarah deserves better than this drama. Mark's eyes narrowed. Better? Like sneaking around behind my back? Or using one's company card for her new life? He pulled out his phone, opening an email from his lawyer. I sent Andrew the recordings. Every call, every plan you all made. It's not drama, Olivia, it's evidence. Juan finally rose from the table, his steps heavy as he joined them in the hallway. His face was drawn, the weight of Mark's revelations sinking in. You sent those to my company, he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, unapologetic. Compliance has them. They're reviewing your expenses, Juan. Presidential suites aren't cheap, and neither is fraud. Juan's hands shook, his career flashing before his eyes. You didn't have to do this, he said, but there was no fight left in him. Sarah grabbed Mark's arm, her grip desperate. Please, don't file those papers. We can go to counseling, start over. Mark gently pulled free, his resolve unshaken. Counseling won't fix a marriage you already left, Sarah. You made your choice when you started planning with Dave. He glanced at the dining room, where the untouched turkey sat, a symbol of his wasted effort. I cooked for you, for them, thinking it mattered. It didn't. I'm done pretending. Lorena's voice rose to a screech. You'll ruin our family's name. People will talk. Mark's laugh was cold, cutting through her hysteria. Your name's already tied to fraud and lies, Lorena. You did that, not me. He pocketed his phone, the weight of his evidence grounding him. The compliance team's interested in those hotel charges, and the bank's curious about Sarah's secret account. You might want to lawyer up. Olivia tried one last jab, her voice dripping with venom. You're so smug, Mark. Acting like you're perfect. Mark didn't flinch. Perfect? No. Prepared? Absolutely. He held up his recorder, its red light off, but its presence a threat. I've got 6 months of your scheming, Olivia. Every word about handling me. Keep talking, and it'll all go to court. Olivia's face paled, her bravado collapsing. One stepped forward, surprising everyone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, holding them out to Mark. The Malibu house, he said, his voice low, almost broken. It's mine, not Lorena's. Take it. Stay there as long as you need. Mark stared at the keys, caught off guard. One met his eyes, a flicker of something like respect in his gaze. I was wrong about you, he admitted. I let this happen. You don't deserve it. Mark took the keys, their weight solid in his palm. Why now? He asked, searching Juan's face. Juan sighed, glancing back at the dining room where Sarah still stood, trembling. Because I see it now, you're more honest than my own daughter. The admission hung heavy, a crack in the family's facade. Lorena gasped, but Juan ignored her, his focus on Mark. Use the house. Clear your head. Sarah's voice broke through, a desperate wail. Dad, no. You can't take his side. Juan turned to her, his expression hard. You did this, Sarah. You and your mother, plotting like I wouldn't notice. He shook his head, the betrayal cutting deep. You've cost me everything. Sarah crumpled, sobbing into her hands, but Mark felt no pity. She'd orchestrated this, and now the consequences were hers. Mark opened the front door, the cold night air rushing in. This isn't about sides, Sarah, he said, stepping onto the porch. It's about truth. You wanted a new life? You've got it, but it's not the one you planned. He looked back one last time, taking in the chaos, Lorena's frantic gestures, Olivia's stunned silence, Sarah's tears, Juan's defeat. The dinner he'd slaved over was cold, forgotten, just like his marriage. He climbed into his car, the engine roaring to life. His phone buzzed again. Andrew, confirming the divorce papers were ready. File them Monday, Mark texted back, his fingers steady. As he pulled out of the driveway, the radio played a soft jazz tune, a stark contrast to the storm he'd left behind. The keys to the Malibu house sat on the passenger seat, a symbol of a fresh start he hadn't expected. For the first time in years, Mark felt unburdened, the road ahead his own to choose. Mark Rodriguez drove through the quiet streets of Santa Monica, the Malibu house keys glinting on the passenger seat of his car. The radio hummed with a low jazz tune, its rhythm steady against the chaos he'd left behind at the Christmas dinner. His phone vibrated relentlessly, Sarah's name flashing, followed by Lorena's, then Olivia's. He silenced it, letting the notifications pile up like debris from a collapsed life. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint salt of the Pacific, and for the first time in years, Mark felt like he could breathe. He pulled into a gas station, the neon lights casting a glow over the dashboard. While the tank filled, he dialed his lawyer, Andrew. The call connected on the second ring. Andrew's voice calmed despite the late hour. "Mark, you okay?" he asked, kids' laughter faint in the background. Mark leaned against the car, the Malibu keys heavy in his hand. "Better than ever," he said. "File everything Monday. Divorce, fraud reports, the works." Andrew paused, then replied, "No turning back after this." "You're sure?" Mark's answer was firm. "I've never been more certain." Hanging up, Mark glanced at the keys. Juan's unexpected gesture, handing over the Malibu house, still lingered, a crack in the man's arrogance that Mark hadn't seen coming. He started the engine and headed toward the coast, the road winding toward the beachfront property. The house came into view, a sleek, modern structure perched above the ocean, its windows dark. Mark parked, stepped out, and unlocked the door, the key turning smoothly, like a promise of something new. Inside, he flicked on a light, revealing an open space with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the waves. He didn't linger, moving straight to the kitchen to find a bottle of whiskey in a cabinet. Pouring a glass, he settled into a chair on the deck, the ocean's rhythm grounding him. The whiskey burned, sharp and clean, as he replayed the night's events. Sarah's betrayal, exposed by her own carelessness. Juan's career, teetering on the edge of ruin. Lorena's obsession with status, shattered by reality. Olivia's venom, silenced by truth. And Dave, the pawn who'd fled when the game turned ugly. Mark's phone buzzed again, Sarah, begging for a call back. He deleted the message, then blocked her number, along with Lorena's and Olivia's. Each tap felt like shedding a weight, cutting ties to a family that had treated him like an outsider in his own home. He sipped the whiskey, the warmth spreading through him. The divorce papers would hit Sarah hard, especially with the prenup locking her out of his assets, his business, his house, his grandmother's estate. She'd gambled on a future that didn't exist, and now she'd face the fallout. Back in Santa Monica, the dining room was likely still a war zone. Sarah would be scrambling, trying to salvage her plans, but the recordings Mark had sent to Andrew were ironclad. Her secret bank account, the hotel charges on Juan's corporate card, the whispered conversations about replacing him, they'd all surface in court. Juan's company would dig deeper, and those Tuesday afternoons at the Ritz-Carlton would cost him more than just his pride. Lorena's social standing, her so-called legacy, would crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. Olivia, for once, had no one to manipulate. Mark stood, walking to the edge of the deck, the ocean stretching endless before him. He thought of Juan's apology, the keys, the flicker of respect in the man's eyes. It didn't erase years of condescension, but it was a start, a rare moment of accountability in a family built on lies. Mark didn't need their approval anymore. He had his business, thriving after years of hard work, and this house, a haven he'd earned through his own grit. His phone lit up with a new email from Andrew, papers finalized. Fraud report submitted. Call if you need me. Mark nodded to himself, pocketing the device. He wasn't running from the past, but stepping into a future he controlled. Sarah would face the consequences of her choices, financially, emotionally, socially. Dave, if he was smart, was long gone, rethinking every step that led him to that dinner. The family's schemes had unraveled, their arrogance exposed, and Mark stood taller for it. He raised his glass to the ocean, the waves a quiet applause to his resolve. "To freedom," he said aloud, the words carrying into the night. The whiskey tasted like victory, not bitter, but earned. He wasn't the man they'd underestimated, the one they thought would fold under pressure. He was Mark Rodriguez, owner of his life, his choices, his future. The Malibu house was more than a refuge. It was a symbol of what he'd reclaimed. As the stars emerged above the Pacific, Mark felt a calm settle over him, deeper than the whiskey's warmth. This wasn't the end of his story, but the start of something better. No more dinners where he played the servant. No more holidays spent proving his worth to people who never valued it. No more pretending a broken marriage was worth saving. He'd walked away, not out of weakness, but strength, the strength to choose himself over their dysfunction. Mark finished his drink and set the glass down, the sound sharp against the quiet night. Tomorrow, he'd call his team, push his IT company forward, maybe even take a trip somewhere new. The world was open, untainted by the lies he'd left behind. Sarah and her family could scramble to save face, but their legacy was their own to ruin. Mark's legacy, he realized, was this moment, standing alone, unbroken, ready for whatever came next.